Yeah, so if you were to Google eczema or go to the pediatrician, they'd say it's an inflammatory skin condition. And while it presents that way, just as we were speaking of earlier, it's obviously a much deeper problem. And then people have a hard time dealing with it because they're treating it as just a surface level skin condition. And
Mm.
what's happening in the case of eczema and a lot of autoimmune conditions is there's a dysbiosis happening. There's a lack of diversity in the gut. There's liver stagnation happening. There's a lot of there's detoxification issues. There's lymph stagnation. And then, in our case, we had to completely reboot their digestive capacity. Like kids are born
Mm.
with a very limited digestive capacity, like they're only supposed to have breast milk and then they move on from there. But they were all really, really struggling with digestion. So that whole process was messed up. So
Mm. Looking back, why do you think that your children were struggling with their digestion initially?
it's same thing as just, their inflammation buckets were over full. they
Mm.
were they were overflowing and their internal systems couldn't handle it. And so we had to, looking back at that time in my life, or just and even like growing up, I ate like as a child of the 80s, like I ate pretty much only processed foods, right? Like I
Mm.
ate a lot of macaroni and cheese and
Mm.
chicken nuggets and soda. And, looking back, like my parents are like, well, it was just convenient and it was new for them. And it's
Mm.
just like, yeah, this is just what you do. And kids still eat like that today. I didn't give quite as many processed foods to my kids and we were healthy, but I still we ate processed foods. We still eat like
Mm.
canned soup and
Mm.
stuff like that. And, there's just we were just really detached from that like seasonal whole real food way of eating that our bodies require to have
Mm.
functioning digestive systems.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think an important thing to point out at this point as well, and I'm sure you're kind of, level-headed with this situation, but, I think it's really important for parents not to feel guilty, right? Because, all parents are doing their best, right? All parents, pretty much. I think it's fair to say almost every parent is, they're doing their absolute best. And I think it's important, if someone is a parent and they've got a child with eczema, is not to blame themselves, right? Because they're always doing the best they can. And I'm sure you've kind of been through that process, right?
Yeah, and I still deal with it, of course. It's just like, oh my goodness, this is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to watch. And now that we're on the other side of it, I can breathe easier. But yeah, it doesn't do any good to wallow, and it doesn't do
Mm.
any good to say coulda, shoulda, woulda. But that's the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing is because when you know better, you can do better. So
Mm.
there's things that you need to change and you can make those changes. And then that will change the trajectory of your kids' lives. And
Mm.
so that's that's what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, I had a mouthful of mercury amalgam fillings. And, I know there's a part of my mum that kind of feels a bit guilty that she let that happen. But at the end of the day, that's what dentists were doing. But, they weren't offering, oh, by the way, mercury is one of the most poisonous substances in the world. But when we put it in your child's mouth, it becomes completely safe. Right. Right.
Yep.
Um, so, I've got no blame when it comes to my mother. She was doing the best she could. I had a cavity in my tooth. It needs to be filled. Right.
Yep.
I mean, it cost me thousands and thousands of pounds to get those replaced, probably a five-figure sum. But,
Hmm.
I've got no negative thoughts about that. I was in that situation and my decision was, right, I need to get this stuff out of my body and I need to detoxify myself.
Yep.
There was no blame attached, right? Not
Right.
even not even to the dentist, because the dentist didn't know any better either, right? Because that's how they were, I was going to say trained, but indoctrinated, really.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like I still know the taste of that like pink antibiotic that was like liquid,
Mm.
because I had it all the time as a kid. And they didn't know any better. Like, my mom had no idea, and it's really hard to say no thank you to somebody wearing a white coat. Like,
Mm.
on my journey, that's extremely hard. By the time I had my 4th and I was, nobody in the, I'm sorry. I apologize. No one in the natural world, like in the home birth or birthing center world, would touch me, right? Because I had already had 3 cesareans, so I had to go the hospital route. So I found
Mm.
the most, like, agreeable doctor I could. But, like, to do things like swabbing and things like that, that really, really do make a difference if you're gonna have a
Mm.
cesarean birth, it was really frowned upon. I had to really fight, and I had to really fight after there's no way to have a cesarean without being loaded up on so many drugs. And, even after that point, and then I had lost a lot of blood, like, still had to really fight to be like, stop putting more drugs into my body because that's going directly to my baby.
Mm.
You do have to put on your brave face, and you have to stand in the I never went back to that pediatrician once I had that conversation that I told you about earlier, because that was like horrifying, and I knew we weren't aligned, and like that's just not
Mm.
how I was going to move forward. But it's a hard thing to do. It's You have to advocate for your kids, but they'll look at you, you don't have an MD, and they'll look at you like you're crazy,
Mm.
and they'll say things that make you doubt yourself, and you just have to stay strong in that inner knowing, as a parent, as a mom, as a parent, that you're doing the right thing for your kids.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned was swabbing. So can you explain, I suppose, especially for women that might be listening to this that are pregnant right now, what swabbing is and what the benefits are
Mhm.
of doing swabbing?